have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather exposed
have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather
Some of them still haven't been told about the tinfoil hat they're wearing on their nose and mouth. Autonomy and economy, they close it down. Notice how they let us know what they won't allow. Only sometimes ignore the lies and the double think. Pay no mind to the puppet strings, cause once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. Just speaking for us heathens that love freedom. One reason my gun's clean and I read books. Take a deep look into history, they don't teach us. The evidence is being purged from libraries, so lies carry more weight. They try to hide the core strength. People living without the trivium, unaware of the gift their ancestors have given them. It's been hidden, but to get the facts, you know you gotta get your whip, hat and coat and dig like Indiana Jones. Before you can take the power back, gotta know where the power's at. Tragedy and hope. Before you can take the power back, gotta know where the power's at. Tragedy and hope. MK Ultra, something maybe we might should know about. Building 7, something maybe we might should know about. John O'Neill, something maybe we might should know about. The dancing Israelis, something maybe we might should know about. USS Liberty, something maybe we might should know about. For agreement, something maybe we might should know about. Bohemian Grove, something maybe we might should know about. British East India Company, something maybe we might should know about. Operation Mockingbird, something maybe we might should know about. Operation Paperclip, something maybe we might should know about. Ruby Ridge, something maybe we might should know about. The Opium Wars, something maybe we might should know about. Before you can take the power back, gotta know where the power's at. Tragedy and hope. Before you can take the power back, gotta know where the power's at. Tragedy and hope. Tierra Griffin, rock on. Anthony Sutton, rock on. Frederick Bastiat, rock on. Richard Grove, rock on. James Corbett, rock on. Gary Webb, rock on. John Taylor Gatto, rock on. Gary Bezmenov, rock on. Eustace Mullins, rock on. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, rock on. General Smedley Butler, rock on. Carol Quigley, rock on. Before you can take the power back, gotta know where the power's at. Tragedy and hope. Before you can take the power back, gotta know where the power's at. Tragedy and hope.
Welcome, Truth Seeker. It's not easy to discern truth from fiction on holodeck Earth. Grand Theft World is a fire hose of illumination and inspires the hearts and minds of truthers seeking freedom in a world environment of manipulation and control. Richard Grove and special guests take a deep dive into the people, places, and events that have shaped our world. Through a lens of critical thinking, to polish the gems and sort the chaff, to reveal the true machinations behind world events. Piece by piece, podcast by podcast, a portrait of reality emerges that we can use to take educated action in the fight for consciousness, truth, and freedom. Grand Theft World episodes include clips from the brightest and best podcasters and articles every week. A weekly special guest brings their expertise and knowledge. Join the vibrant GTW community of researchers and like-minded peers to collaborate on solutions and how we can truly create change. Take your first step on this adventure. Join now.
Greetings and welcome to the Grand Theft World podcast, hosted and sponsored by the fine folks who become members over at grandtheftworld.com. They like the podcast enough to support the podcast and want to see the podcast keep going without commercials or other interruptions like sponsor breaks and reading and all the other stuff that they do on other podcasts, but we don't do here. So we like to just remind you, if you like the podcast, support the podcast, show up at the town hall, get your voice heard, and meet the others from around the world who love a lifestyle of liberty and freedom and try to see through the gaslighting in their own world. All right, to this week in Grand Theft World news history, there's many stories that we need to cover in tonight's time capsule of history. We have stories like gangs have taken over apartment complexes, not in Colorado, not in Ohio, but in San Antonio, Texas. But we also have gangs taking over places in Queens, New York. So there's almost competing gangs trying to oust the other gangs traditionally and control this country. It's an interesting circumstance continuing to unfold. We have Hurricane Milton and Helene victims coming to terms with the changes in their lifestyles and the knowledge that FEMA is not going to come in and really save the day or make a whole big difference, because they're out of money for the year and they still have other things to do for the year. So sorry about your luck. But on the flip side, the Biden-Harris administration has given $425 million over to Ukraine because, they didn't have enough money over there. And so those people need to have power. Do you understand? They need to have power and electricity over there, not the people in North Carolina or Florida or Georgia or Eastern Tennessee. So we're going to see stories like that. Now, in the past week, Trump did something called the Al Smith dinner, and it's supposedly both candidates are supposed to be there and kind of make fun of each other. Only one candidate showed up, so that was a different circumstance for that this week. One of the candidates who didn't show up, her name will remain, silent. We don't want to embarrass anybody, but they made a really bad SNL Molly Shannon type video as like their video appearance at the Al Smith dinner. And I think that just told a lot of people that the parade has ended. We're calling the game for rain. It's over. It's over. There's a bunch of weak activities this past week. I think it was the spray and pray type of, let's just hope something sticks here. And on the flip side, you had Trump earlier today taking his shift over at McDonald's, serving up fries and goods to people in the drive-through line. So I think his quip was that he's now worked at McDonald's 15 minutes longer than Kamala. And if you didn't work at McDonald's, you don't have to make it up. It's not like everyone has to work at McDonald's in their history, but if you didn't, then that could be an issue. Anyway, we've got a lot to cover tonight, and we got more serious stories than that. So let's go to Luke Rudowski from wearechange.org and thebestpoliticalshirts.com. Let's get his report from earlier today, and then we'll dig into tonight's show card.
A boiling hot pot. What a perfect representation of what's happening in the world. China definitely has a long way to go when it comes to their communal dining arrangements, but they have other things that they're preparing for, as of course we just got the news from Xi Jinping himself, dressed in full military fatigues, that China is preparing for battle. You heard that correctly, as there are a lot of crazy geopolitical developments happening right now. Not just regarding Taiwan, which of course the Chinese military recently surrounded in record numbers with their forces, as what's happening right now, especially with the larger potential of an October surprise still to come, as we have already had a lot of them, we're probably going to have a lot more, is something that I think we should be paying close attention to right now, as of course it has a lot of bigger global geopolitical implications that of course will affect your life in more ways than one. As of course, after the record number of Chinese warplanes that flew close to Taiwan during their military drills and exercises that were, just simulating the invasion of Taiwan, the communist leader Xi Jinping also dressed up in full military fatigues and addressed his country and his military to literally prepare for war, as they are now intensifying their military and battle drills around Taiwan. As Xi Jinping specifically made those comments to the People's Liberation Army Rocket Force, which he personally visited this Thursday, as the address also ran on state-run broadcast television, as he talked about the very important interest of the Chinese government and military to, quote, enhance their strategic deterrent and combat capabilities. As China has claimed that Taiwan is actually their territory, and definitely have been representing a show of force around the island in the last few years. in an ever so more aggressive fashion during the Biden administration, which geopolitically and internationally is seen as a very weak administration, as Beijing deployed fighter jets, drones, warships, their Coast Guard vessels that encircled Taiwan within the last few days, representing the fourth round of large-scale military war games around the island within just the last 2 years. As the Chinese state that even has the grips of control on Hollywood has celebrities groveling and apologizing for even acknowledging that Taiwan exists. As John Cena previously came out and apologized for addressing Taiwan as a country.
有一个错误，所有人问我，如果我可以用中文，
I Hollywood ho for China money go. I saw Oh, God, that's absolutely pathetic. And let's be honest, with the way that 2024 has been going, especially with the ever unsure geopolitical situation within the Biden administration, this definitely does signal some larger troubling developments that, of course, could have a role in our political system, as this could be yet another geopolitical conundrum that we have to deal with that is extremely complicated and, of course, will have a very vast, severe impact on our economy that is dependent on Chinese manufacturing. As we are just 17 days away from November 5th, and between now and that time period, anything and everything could happen. As, of course, a larger change in Washington, D.C. could signal different situations for countries that they might want to take advantage of right now. As in between now and then, anything and everything could happen, specifically when it comes to cyber attacks, larger kind of conflicts and wars, black swan events, crises, false flag attacks, power grids going down, as there's going to be some probable operations being run here, as let's be honest here, the Biden administration and their close ties to a lot of Chinese government officials and government businesses, especially with Hunter Biden, do highlight how essentially the Biden administration has been doing a lot of the bidding for the Chinese. When we see what they did, especially in Brazil, allowing a more favorable Chinese-style government to be implemented over a more right-wing populist American-centered government, you see the United States government literally get involved in elections in foreign countries that directly help out China and not the American country or its economy. Now, you look at what happened last week with North Korea, blowing up their own bridges, railways, specifically connecting them to South Korea. You look at the reports coming in from Ukraine, specifically highlighting how there are now allegedly North Koreans fighting alongside the Russians here. These are larger developments that the French government has come out and sent warnings about, as it's very interesting to note here that it was just a few weeks ago that the French government specifically came out and said that they are considering sending their own soldiers on the ground here. But it looks like Vladimir Putin has, of course, made and brokered a deal with North Korea. That, of course, changes the game here significantly, escalating it, because if we see things from a historical context, we've seen this one before. Oh, yeah, there's a small skirmish. There's a local conflict here between these larger conflicts. Oh, they get alliances with other countries. And other countries are now fighting in this conflict, making them strategic targets. The conflict, of course, expands to those specific territories, and bada bing, bada boom. Oh, we got ourselves a global conflict here. As the Lithuanian Minister of Foreign Affairs just recently came out and said at the beginning of the year, Emmanuel Macron hinted at putting boots on the ground. At the end of the year, North Korea actually did it. We are still at the back foot, reacting to escalations instead of reversing it. Macron's ideas should now be revisited, better later than never. As he went on and then specifically detailed how China's interests are very aligned with Russia, as American foreign policy has pushed the two countries together that have been historically opposed to each other, as there's a lot of bad blood between the Chinese and the Russians and their empires and their long kind of contentious history that saw them at odds with each other, competing for resources and territory. Now, the two countries, along with other BRICS nations that are directly being centered and attacked by the United States and their sanctions and their foreign policy, are all kind of coalescing, coming together and now raising some larger questions about the U.S. petrodollar and U.S. hegemony. As the Lithuanian foreign minister is suggesting that China is playing a big key role here and, of course, could potentially expand these conflicts for their own strategic opportunity that they could take advantage of. As, of course, this could be why China is readying up its troops and its forces, as a lot of what's happening right now geopolitically is all kind of intertwined in some very weird, complex ways that we hope to, of course, make sense of. As, of course, if China makes their larger kind of move here, specifically against Taiwan, this implicates large factions of the U.S. economy that is dependent on China, as of course a lot of our pharmaceuticals, a lot of our things that we are dependent on every single day directly comes from China. And if that pipeline would have been cut off automatically, America not having a big manufacturing base would be kind of isolated and screwed over, especially during very serious situations where the two would be at odds with each other, potentially influencing and supporting the opposite sides of other proxy conflicts. As that situation is already unfolding, and Donald Trump, a man who has been one of the few presidents of the United States that has actually called out China for their larger kind of geopolitical international trade, according to the Wall Street Journal, will, quote, radically remake world trade as he is promising tariffs that could see the rise to the highest level since the 1930s. Now, personally, I'm not for tariffs, but Donald Trump is making the argument that American products can't be in these markets because of tariffs that other countries put on these goods. So I'm going to do the same while also incentivizing domestic consumer bases to, of course, create the products here in the United States. A policy that is kind of an America First policy, as the Wall Street Journal argues that this U.S.-led system against China could result in a global trade war. As I would argue, the Biden administration is already putting us on the precipice of an actual war, as Trump has come out and said that China will respect him because Xi knows he is crazy. Very interesting comments there, and I don't know if that might be the best policy to implement, especially when so many lives and so many things are on the line here. But I bet certainly it would be a lot better of a policy than the Biden administration's policy that colludes with Chinese businesses and government officials and has done a lot of very kind of shady moves that directly benefit them and do not help the American public. As Donald Trump is saying that he would impose tariffs on China if they sought to blockade Taiwan, saying that he's going to tax them 150% to 200%. As Trump also described Xi as a, quote, fierce person. He also described Putin as someone that he got along with. And whatever you might think about Donald Trump, his actions do seem a little bit more proactive than the Biden administration that respectfully is dealing with a situation that's escalating a lot of these tensions around the world. Now, either way you kind of look at it, there definitely does seem like there are larger kind of financial instabilities that are going to be happening in this country, not just with international trade, but also with the future of the U.S. petrodollar, as BRICS nations are coming together and buying up a lot of gold. All of this as there are some BRICS nations that are calling for the end of the U.S. dollar dominance, which of course would have significant ramifications on the purchasing power of your dollar in your pocket right now. As of course, the U.S. government already is printing a lot of it, spending a lot of it. We're in a deficit. We're in a huge debt. And the only real reason why the dollar is as powerful as it is because everyone uses it. If a lot of people stop using it, this does signal some bigger problems ahead of us. Now, China has been implementing a very kind of interesting international policy where they promote more trade and more kind of infrastructure building, especially in developing nations that they get control of their resources in exchange for. That does kind of promote this larger Belt and Road initiative that has expanded trade to a lot of Russia, to also a lot of Ukraine, to a lot of Africa, to a lot of Iran. As the Chinese are doing a lot of international business. They're gobbling up a lot of very important natural resources. They're getting control of a lot of important pieces of infrastructure around the world. As this other larger global instability could create a situation for them that they could personally take advantage of, especially the current situation unfolding right now in the Middle East, that could be more kind of beneficial to them and their larger kind of geopolitical objectives, as of course there are now pro-Iranian accounts that have allegedly leaked the U.S. intelligence on the Israeli retaliation against them that a lot of people expect to happen very soon. Another major escalation to keep an eye out on, As I would also say, the situation in Ukraine is also very unstable, as there should be larger retaliatory efforts seen there very soon as well. The Koreans now being involved changes the landscape of this geopolitical conflict that is therefore getting more complicated and bringing us closer to the precipice of a global international world war. So as that happens, make sure to take care of your health so you're ready for anything and everything coming your way. And one of the best ways to do that is through, of course, wearechange.shop. We have a lot of great products available to you. We have another one down.
All right, check out Luke's work at wearechange.org and wearechange.shop that he's just pitching there. He's good at making his calls to action and staying an independent reporter. And those are types of things you have to do. All right, so Zelensky in his t-shirt, I'm not too worried about him because every time I see him, I just kind of like giggle inside like a little kid that hears a fart joke in third grade because Zelensky's a stand-up comedian. He's a guy who played a piano with his member on stage. Like he's done acts in high heels and like skin tight plastic suits and stuff. He's an interesting character, but he's not the leader of Ukraine. He's a figurehead. He's a front piece. He's a front organization that they might put in front of people to let them think that NATO doesn't have their hand up inside there, provoking Russia the whole way along, which is why the United States puts so much money into Ukraine. It's not that we're just trying to help out over there. It's if we give money to Ukraine, they're in debt to Western nations, and then when they can't pay that debt, we get whatever mining rights they have over there. They've done that around the world for a long time. That's what the IMF and World Bank do. Confessions of an Economic Hitman is a book you might check out if you don't know about such things. But Scott, what did you think of the opening salvo there?
Yeah, man, it's getting crazy out there, and so I remember talking to a Marine a long time ago. And he was telling me that one of the things, and this was like many years ago, he said one of the situations that they were training for was a situation in which like the U.S. would be embroiled in all of these international conflicts. And then that would be the time that China would take advantage of like the U.S. being spread too thin. And he was talking about like land invasion type of thing. And I'm like, I don't know, we're at that level yet, but still the idea that we're potentially looking at some sort of conflict in the Middle East that's probably going to drain a lot of resources. We're already sending a lot of aircraft carriers and troops out to that area. And so, it's a perfect time for them to make their move when the U.S. is already completely sidetracked elsewhere. So definitely concerning. I don't know. I'm sure they have contingency plans for all that, but it's like,
do they though?
Do they though? Yeah.
Right. Because what you're pointing at is legitimate. And I guess my point of talking about Zelensky in his t-shirt is the flip side is Xi Jinping in his camo, which I haven't seen his look before. And I thought, what would it look like if Trump was in full military gear? What would that say about our country? That'd be not a good thing. I don't think it's a good thing for China to be in that position. I don't know if he feels threatened or if that's like they're going to lead by provocation. And if you take that part of the world and you take Russia and China and North Korea and Iran, and you circle those, like that's a big landmass that could, if they resolve their differences between each other, could be a formidable opposition to the West. Yeah. On the flip side, I could just picture the West turning that all into like glass parking lot and not caring too much about that. But that wouldn't be good for anybody in the world for that to happen. I almost feel like somebody who's a diplomat or peacemaker needs to walk all these leaders through this scenario so they can all, because like put yourself in their position for a second. They have spent billions and billions and billions of dollars on these nuclear weapons and things that they want to destroy people with, right? And if they never get their rocks off seeing those things getting used, it's always going to be like a temptation that they want to go and use those things, right? Now, what if you took the world leaders and you put them into a simulation where they got to push the button and feel that adrenaline of like, yeah, we're going to take the other side out. And then you let that come to fruition and they have that like big dopamine hit, like they got to do the thing, but then they get to see the fallout and they get to realize that's not a dopamine hit they ever want to take because it ends humanity in a recognizable form forever. It takes away all the accomplishments of humans who have lived lives heretofore and just says that doesn't matter because now we're going to make everything a wasteland. So I think it's a real problem that there are so many nuclear weapons on the planet owned by these, not even countries own them. Like the United States doesn't necessarily own its arsenal. There's defense contractors and other international entities that kind of have multi-country purview on these types of things. And I'm not talking about the UN and their weapons checking. I'm talking about how things actually work. So it's a precarious environment they're leading us into. It's not just with the Middle East. I see what you're saying. Like, 'cause I look at it like, you ever play Risk?
Oh yeah.
So you want to get their forces away from the place so you can go in and take over. It's also the plot of any number of movies, Assault on Precinct 13 or whatever, you get the cops to go out to a thing and then you take over headquarters. Like that's a whole thing in movies and fiction and literature. So in these types of games, it's military strategy. It's even higher level than criminals trying to rob somebody, right? So the deployment of we have clips tonight where U.S. troops are being deployed to the Middle East. It's the deployment of military to these other countries and the debt we're getting into for these other countries that puts America in a precarious situation where either bankers or another country can come in and maybe give us some hassle, try to set up and occupy and that sort of stuff. We don't want to do that during our lifetimes, but we don't also want to have it happen to the next generation because we didn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. And maybe some of tonight's news will help to illustrate the direction in which the globalists are taking people.
Exactly. And then the other thing that kind of stood out to me was they were talking about how the BRICS nations are buying up all the gold reserves and stuff like that. And so I was like, well, I wonder if they're doing the same thing with like Bitcoin, because I know here there's been kind of a renaissance with the Bitcoin community, the massive increase in value as a result of like all these ETFs, like all like BlackRock getting in and all these funds investing in it as an investment strategy. And so that led me down this little rabbit hole just real quick. I was looking at it. Apparently just on Friday, BRICS, Russia, Putin specifically announced this new digital currency plan for the BRICS nations. I don't know if anybody's seen that or heard of this, but it looks like they unveiled on Friday this new blockchain-based digital currency system that they're implementing. And so it's like, whoa, is this their version of like a CBDC? It doesn't say CBDC directly, but it looks like
it's their version of it for sure. And the BRICS countries are just countries that were U.S. dependent on the dollar pretty much. Mm-hmm. And then as that cartel relationship got more and more strict, they're like, hey, how about we set up our own cartel relationship?
Exactly.
And that's what they're doing. Yeah, they're going to mirror it. So they're the Bank of England is to the Vatican what BRICS is to Western economics.
Yeah. So I just thought that was interesting. Very interesting. It looks like they gave everybody in attendance at this little meetup a digital card with a QR code that has 500 rubles on it.
How easy. Yeah. If only we could use QR codes and rubles to help people with FEMA and Helene victims. But without rubles, use American dollars. Like it's just the same, they could do the same thing. They just don't.
Yeah. It'd be crazy. Like if I was like them, I would say, what a PR move. Just what if like Russia sent like millions of dollars of aid to North Carolina?
There was a scene in the series Veep where Julia Louis-Dreyfus is playing like the president, and this Russian dude comes up to her and says, we would like to give you a bunch of money for your campaign. And she goes into her boilerplate how she's not allowed to accept it. He goes, oh, no, sorry. We would like to buy your, beach house and give it back to you. We take it through the shell company, then we go over to the Caymans, then we take it back, and then you have your house. And then she's like, oh, that's completely acceptable. Yeah. Right. So it's just like, it's not that they don't take the money. It's like there's a set of rules. And if you go outside the rules, then you can take the money. But inside those set of rules, it says no. So that's another problem. When people who are in political office are so needy and greedy that they sell out their own fellow citizens whom they're supposed to be serving.
Yeah.
Like if you want to go be a crook, go do it someplace else. But you don't have to do it within our political system. And that's a big problem is there's a lot of crooks in the political system, and a lot of them are lawyers. So they're pretty good at it. They're better than the average crook. And you're not allowed to have people with a foreign obligation or debt or title in our Congress. So technically, because if you pass a bar, and that goes back to the British accredited registry, you're serving a foreign entity and you're not allowed to be in our Congress. And yet our Congress is full of people who have law degrees and bar exam clearances and so on and so forth. So,
yep. Absolutely. It's shocking. And it's really interesting too, how the system is designed in such a way to where if you can figure out the loopholes that you can profit. Like, and it's like, how they say all these big corporations don't pay their fair share in taxes. Well, they just know how to play the game. Right. And it's
they wrote the game. They bribed the people who write the rules.
Yeah. But an argument could be made that like, we can do the same. Like we can
Yes.
figure out the loophole. We can play the game too. It's like they almost want you to engage in the system. And they're sitting back. They're like, oh, good job. You know what I mean? Like they're like, they get off and they're excited. Like when you figure out the loopholes and you play the game.
I think they only get off on it when they feel that they're special. And if other people start exploiting those loopholes, they would seek to close them and just play straight up crooked game.
Sure. True.
Right.
True. But if you're a business owner out there, like
That's right. That's right.
Like go play
That's
the
right.
game if you're gonna play the
Go
game.
find their rule book and then figure out, like, you know, just the same way that libertarians do with milk. And you can't sell raw milk and et cetera, but I could sell you soil conditioner not for human consumption.
Exactly.
And we could do business, right?
Exactly. Or you're not
we have
allowed
a
to
layer of trust and understanding that goes beyond the labels on the product.
Yes. Or my favorite is like you're not allowed to have a stock so that you can shoulder a rifle shorter than a 16-inch barrel. But if you can have a thing that wraps around your forearm, because we have to be inclusive with the people that only have one arm, right? But it's definitely not a stock, and I would never dream of shouldering that weapon. But
I mean, I would never have a brace.
Just a brace.
Never have a brace. Never have a brace on my pistol.
No, never.
I'm an American. I don't need to make up such words. But that's another thing, the ATF. We do have a story tonight because Tim Waltz did some firearms demonstrations for people the past week, and I think we should include those things because Second Amendment is not for hunting. Like, hunting's for eating. That's before even defending yourself. You have to be alive in order to defend yourself. So people have the right to hunt and fish. I don't know who's giving you licenses or permits or how they got more rights than you, but you should maybe have a discussion with that power structure at some point when you understand what's going on.
Everyone's doing some kind of self-help these days, and you can find a million self-help courses out there. Most other courses out there are hosting lectures, they're hosting videos, they're maybe even doing Q&As, and these are great starting points to encourage learning. But at Autonomy, we believe that hands-on practice is the best way to really lock in what we're learning. There's no better way to gain confidence and mastery than through action. After each lecture, we practice the concepts we've learned with other students, giving and receiving feedback in a non-judgmental environment. The result is mastery of concepts like entrepreneurship, ethical sales, and self-reliance in an environment that directly translates to the real world. Plus, you make connections with other like-minded individuals who are learning right alongside you, and you have a lifetime membership in the community. The Autonomy course with Richard Grove equips you with confidence, competence, and courage in a world filled with confusion and noise. You can learn more at getautonomy.info. We'll see you there.
What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happen. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested,
in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come on.